The room was packed. The anticipation was electric, the kind of energy that only arises when two giants prepare to clash. It wasn't a physical fight, nor a business negotiation, it was something far more intense. It was a battle of ideas, of belief, of vision. On one side of the stage sat Jordan Peterson, the famed psychologist and intellectual, a man whose thoughts on responsibility, meaning, and faith had reshaped millions of lives. On the other side sat Elon Musk, the billionaire innovator, the man pushing humanity toward the stars. Both men were visionaries. Both had devoted their lives to something greater than themselves. But in this moment, they stood on opposite ends of a single, burning question: does Christianity still matter in the modern world? The moderator had barely finished introducing them when Musk leaned forward, eyes sharp and calculating. "Let's start with something simple," he said. "Why do you think Christianity is still relevant?" Peterson didn't flinch. He had debated some of the most brilliant minds in the world, but he knew this conversation would be different. Musk wasn't just an intellectual opponent, he was a man who had reshaped industries, built empires, and proven time and again that logic, not faith, ruled the modern world. But Peterson also knew something Musk didn't. He took a deep breath. Because Elon, whether you like it or not, even the very civilization that allows you to create and innovate is built on the moral framework of Christianity. Without it, none of this would exist. The audience shifted. Some leaned forward, eager for a clash of ideas. Others exchanged glances. Musk, the man known for solving impossible problems, had never been challenged in this way before. Musk let out a small chuckle, shaking his head. "That's a bold statement, Jordan. Civilization is built on innovation, science, and logic. If anything, faith has held us back. It asks people to believe in something without proof." Peterson narrowed his eyes, his fingers clasped together. "And yet, the very logic you stand by, the belief in human progress, the trust in knowledge and wisdom, these are not products of mere chance. They stem from a deeper moral foundation, one that comes from the principles of Christianity." Musk's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. A hesitation. A moment of reflection. He wasn't used to being challenged on a fundamental level. Then he smirked. "All right, let's test that theory. Tell me, if Christianity is so vital, why do we still see suffering? If there's a moral framework, why hasn't it solved human problems? Why do people still struggle, still make terrible choices, still fall apart?" Peterson smiled, but there was something knowing in his eyes. "Because morality isn't about eliminating struggle, Elon. It's about guiding people through it." Musk raised an eyebrow. "And you think Christianity does that better than science?" There was a long pause. Then Peterson leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "You build rockets. You plan for Mars. But have you ever asked yourself why? What's the real reason you want humanity to survive beyond Earth?" Musk blinked. For the first time, he hesitated. The audience could feel the shift. The debate had started as an intellectual exercise, but now it was turning into something else. Something personal. For a moment, Musk didn't answer. He looked away, his mind racing. And then, with an almost imperceptible sigh, he said something that no one expected. "I don't know." The room fell into complete silence. And just like that, what had started as a simple debate had transformed into a moment of raw, unfiltered truth. This was no longer about Christianity. This was about something much bigger. Musk's admission sent a ripple through the audience. A man who had built his entire career on certainty, logic, and progress had just admitted to the one thing he didn't have an answer for. Peterson didn't gloat. He didn't smile or react with satisfaction. Instead, he watched Musk carefully, sensing that the moment was far more significant than the words themselves. Musk cleared his throat, quickly regaining his composure. "I mean, I know why," he said, but there was something in his tone, almost like he was trying to convince himself. "Survival. We have to ensure the longevity of human civilization. A single asteroid, a supervolcano, a pandemic, any of these could wipe us out. If we stay on Earth, we're vulnerable. Peterson nodded, his fingers tapping lightly on the table. That's a practical answer. But it's not the real one. Musk frowned. What do you mean? Peterson leaned forward. You've spent billions of dollars, decades of your life, and sacrificed relationships, sleep, and personal well-being for this goal. A simple desire for human survival doesn't explain that level of obsession. Musk's jaw tightened. You're a man of reason, Elon, Peterson continued. But reason alone isn't what drives people to great lengths. It isn't what makes people suffer willingly, push beyond exhaustion, and fight battles they don't have to. There's always something deeper. Musk exhaled sharply, shifting in his seat. I believe in solving problems. That's what I do. There are problems that can be fixed with enough intelligence and resources. Faith, religion, they're just stories people tell themselves when they don't have real solutions. Peterson tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. Stories? Musk nodded. Yes. Stories that give people comfort. But comfort isn't progress. Comfort isn't solving climate change or getting us to Mars. Peterson smiled faintly. And yet, stories are exactly what shaped you. Musk scoffed. I think I shaped myself. Peterson's gaze didn't waver. Really? Then let's talk about the stories that influenced you. You were fascinated by science fiction as a child. You've spoken about how books like The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and Foundation shaped your thinking. You grew up reading tales about human expansion into space, about survival, about meaning. Why do you think those stories resonated with you? Musk opened his mouth, but stopped. The room was silent. Everyone was leaning in, waiting for his answer. After a long pause, Musk finally said, because they showed possibilities. Peterson nodded. Exactly. And that's what religion does. That's what Christianity has done for thousands of years. It doesn't just tell people to sit and wait for salvation, it tells them to build, to grow, to overcome suffering. The stories, the myths, the lessons, they all serve a purpose. And whether you like it or not, your own mission, your own obsession with Mars, is driven by a similar story. You're not just solving a problem, Elon. You're fulfilling a narrative. Musk's eyes narrowed slightly. Peterson continued, his voice calm but firm. You see, people don't follow logic. They follow meaning. They need purpose. You can show them all the data, all the charts, all the probabilities, but in the end, people act because of what they believe in. The most successful leaders in history didn't just present numbers, they told a story people wanted to believe in. Musk let out a breath. So you're saying Christianity is just another story? Peterson shook his head. I'm saying it's the story. The foundation. The one that made everything else possible, including science, including reason, including the civilization that allows you to sit here today and argue against it. Musk rubbed his temple, visibly frustrated but also deeply engaged. He wasn't used to losing arguments. But this wasn't a typical debate. This was something else. Okay, Musk said finally. Let's say you're right. Let's say humans need meaning, and stories provide that meaning. Why does it have to be Christianity? Why not something else? Peterson smiled slightly, as if he had been waiting for that question. Because Christianity is the only story that acknowledges both the greatness and the suffering of humanity. It doesn't just say, be strong or be good, it says life will be suffering, but you must carry it anyway. It gives people a reason to strive. To sacrifice. To build something greater than themselves. Musk crossed his arms, his expression unreadable. That's interesting. For the first time in the entire discussion, he didn't have an immediate counterargument. But then, just as quickly, a glint of defiance returned to his eyes. But religion has also led to wars, division, and suffering. If it's such a great framework, why has it failed so many times? Peterson exhaled, nodding slightly. Because humans are flawed. Because power corrupts. But let me ask you this, Elon, has science not been used to create destruction? Has logic and reason not been twisted to justify terrible things? Musk blinked, and his expression darkened slightly. Peterson pressed on. You see, it's not faith or science that's the problem. It's the people who wield them. Christianity doesn't promise a perfect world. It offers a moral framework, a guide. It's up to individuals whether they use it for good or for evil. Musk looked down, his fingers drumming on the table. He was thinking. Processing. Peterson could tell that something had shifted. Musk wasn't just debating anymore, he was reflecting. And then, just when it seemed like the conversation was winding down, Musk looked up, his eyes sharp. You know, he said slowly, I've never told anyone this, but there was a time when I thought about faith. A very specific moment. The room went dead silent. Peterson leaned in slightly. Tell me. Musk hesitated. Then, finally, he spoke. And what he revealed next would change everything. The room was silent. Not a single person moved. The atmosphere had shifted from an intellectual debate to something far more personal. Elon Musk leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping against the armrest. His usual confident demeanor was gone, replaced by something more introspective. I've never told anyone this, he said again, his voice quieter this time. Jordan Peterson didn't push. He simply watched, waiting. Musk exhaled and looked up at the ceiling for a moment, as if gathering his thoughts. When I was a kid, he finally began, I used to sit outside at night and stare up at the sky. South Africa had these clear, open skies, and you could see everything. The stars, the Milky Way, it felt endless. I used to think about what was out there, beyond what we could see. He paused, his fingers still drumming lightly on the chair. I always believed in reason, Musk continued. In logic. My father wasn't a religious man, and I was never taught to believe in God. But when I was around 12 or 13, something strange happened. I had this overwhelming feeling, this sense, that there was something more. Not a man in the sky, not a figure with a beard, but something. A presence. It wasn't fear. It wasn't comfort. It was just there. The audience was hanging on to every word. Even Peterson, who had spent decades studying human psychology, was captivated. Musk let out a small, almost self-conscious chuckle. Of course, I dismissed it. I told myself it was just my brain playing tricks on me. I went back to reading physics books, solving problems, working out equations. But that moment, it stayed with me. Peterson nodded slowly. And yet, despite everything you've built, everything you've done, you never revisited that feeling? Musk hesitated. I didn't need to. Logic made sense. Faith didn't. If something exists, we should be able to measure it, study it, understand it. Peterson smiled faintly. And yet, here you are, still thinking about it. That moment wasn't erased by logic. It's still there, isn't it? Musk didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. His voice dropped slightly, as if he was reluctant to say the next part out loud. There was another time, he admitted. Much later. After PayPal, before SpaceX. I was going through a difficult time. People think success is this straight line, that you just keep winning. But that's not how it works. I was lost. I had money, I had ideas, but I didn't know if any of it mattered. One night, I was alone, sitting in my house, and for a brief moment, I thought, what if none of this means anything? A murmur ran through the crowd. The idea that one of the most ambitious, successful men in the world had doubted the meaning of his own achievements was shocking. Peterson's expression remained calm, but his eyes were sharp. And what happened next? Musk exhaled. I don't know. I fell asleep. When I woke up, I told myself I was just tired, that I was thinking too much. And I kept going. I built Tesla. I built SpaceX. I kept moving forward because I didn't want to sit in that question for too long. Peterson nodded thoughtfully. So you buried it? Musk shrugged. I chose progress. Peterson smiled slightly. You see, Elon, this is the very thing I've been talking about. Humans aren't machines. We don't just function on logic. Even you, a man who has devoted his life to science, have had moments where reason wasn't enough. You felt something beyond numbers, beyond data. That's what faith is. It's not blind acceptance. It's the recognition that some things can't be measured. Musk rubbed his face. But that's the problem, Jordan. If we start relying on faith, if we stop asking for proof, where does that lead? Science has given us medicine, technology, space travel. Faith didn't put rovers on Mars. Peterson tilted his head. No, but it gave you the will to try. It gave you the drive to push forward when things seemed impossible. Faith isn't about ignoring reality. It's about believing there's something worth fighting for. Even when logic tells you to quit. Musk sighed, rubbing his temples. So you're saying I'm religious? Peterson chuckled. I'm saying that you're human. And humans need meaning. Even the most logical among us. Musk let out a small laugh. So what? Am I supposed to go to church now? Peterson shook his head. That's not the point. The point is that you've spent your entire life searching. Whether it was through science, innovation, or ambition, you've been looking for something greater. And the question you have to ask yourself is, have you found it? Musk went silent. For the first time in the entire discussion, he didn't have an immediate answer. The room was tense. The audience, the moderator, even the cameras, it was as if the entire world was waiting to see what Musk would say next. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Musk looked up. I don't know. And with that, the conversation had changed forever. The air in the room was thick with anticipation. Elon Musk's admission, 3 simple words, I don't know, had shifted the entire tone of the discussion. What had begun as an intellectual debate had now morphed into something far more personal, far more revealing. Jordan Peterson didn't speak right away. He let the moment settle, let Musk sit with the weight of his own words. The billionaire's eyes flickered with something unusual, uncertainty. It was a rare sight, one the world wasn't used to seeing. The moderator, sensing the gravity of the moment, hesitated before finally breaking the silence. Elon, you've built companies that most people thought were impossible. You've dedicated your life to science and reason. But right now, you seem to be questioning something deeper. Are you saying that you want to believe? Musk exhaled sharply and shook his head. No, that's not it. He paused. I mean, I don't think so. Peterson tilted his head slightly, studying Musk's body language. You don't think so? Or you don't want to admit it? Musk's jaw tightened. Look, I respect what you're saying, Jordan. I really do. But my entire life, I've worked with facts, with things I can test and prove. I can see physics in motion. I can see the effects of engineering. But faith? That's different. That's believing in something without evidence. Peterson's eyes sharpened. Who told you that? Musk frowned. Told me what? That faith is belief without evidence. Musk blinked, momentarily thrown off. That's what faith is, isn't it? Peterson shook his head. No. Faith isn't about ignoring evidence. It's about acting in the absence of certainty. Tell me, Elon, when you first started SpaceX, did you know it would work? Musk hesitated. No. But I ran the numbers. I calculated probabilities. And what did those numbers tell you? Musk let out a short laugh, almost bitter. That it would fail. Peterson leaned forward, his expression unreadable. But you did it anyway. Musk didn't answer right away. Peterson pressed on. Why? If logic and reason told you that the chances of success were minimal, why did you push forward? Was it because you had absolute proof it would work? Or was it because, despite all the odds, you believed it was worth trying? Musk opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked away, rubbing his chin. That's faith, Elon, Peterson continued. Faith isn't about rejecting science. It's about stepping into the unknown because something inside you tells you it's worth it. Faith is what makes people sacrifice for their families. It's what makes them push through suffering. And it's what made you risk everything, even when every logical equation said you should fail. Musk sighed. So you're saying I've been religious this whole time without knowing it? Peterson smiled faintly. I'm saying that faith isn't what you thought it was. And maybe, just maybe, it's something you've had all along. Musk ran a hand through his hair. Even if that were true, even if I accepted that faith plays some role in human progress, that doesn't prove Christianity is the right framework. The universe is vast, and we're just a small part of it. Why should I believe that one ancient religion holds the key to everything? Peterson nodded as if he had been expecting the question. Because Christianity isn't just a religion. It's a story. And it's a story that reflects something deep within every human being. Musk scoffed. Stories don't shape reality. Peterson smiled. Oh, but they do. Stories are how we understand the world. They give us meaning. And the greatest story ever told, the one that has outlasted empires, kings, and revolutions, is the story of sacrifice, redemption, and hope. The Christian story isn't about blind obedience. It's about the idea that suffering can have meaning, that sacrifice can lead to something greater. And that's the very idea you've built your own life around. Musk frowned. How do you figure? Peterson gestured towards him. Think about it. You've dedicated your life to something greater than yourself. You've taken on immense suffering to push humanity forward. You've risked your fortune, your health, even your personal relationships, all for a future you may never live to see. Musk leaned back, his expression unreadable. That's the Christian narrative, Peterson continued. The willingness to suffer now so that something greater can exist in the future. To sacrifice for a purpose beyond yourself. And the irony is, you've lived by that principle, even while rejecting its source. Musk chuckled, but there was no humor in it. That's quite the analysis, Jordan. Peterson smirked. It's not an analysis. It's the truth. Musk stared at him for a long moment. Then he shook his head. Even if I agreed with you, even if I saw some truth in what you're saying, it doesn't change the fact that religion has been used to justify terrible things. Wars, oppression, control. If Christianity is such a great framework, why has it been corrupted so many times? Peterson exhaled. Because humans are corruptible. Every system, every ideology, every belief structure has been twisted by those seeking power. But let me ask you something, has science never been used for harm? Has logic never been twisted to justify evil? Musk hesitated. Of course it has. Then by your logic, should we abandon science? Musk frowned. No. Science is a tool. It can be used for good or bad. Peterson nodded. And faith is the same. It's not the tool that's the problem. It's the hands that wield it. Musk rubbed his temple. This is a lot. Peterson smiled. Truth usually is. The room was dead silent. The audience could feel the weight of the conversation. Then, after a long pause, Musk let out a deep breath. You know, he said slowly, I never really thought about it like that. Peterson leaned back, satisfied. Maybe it's time you did. For the first time, Musk didn't argue. And that was the biggest revelation of all. Elon Musk sat still. His usual rapid-fire responses, his signature smirk, both were gone. Instead, he looked at Jordan Peterson with an expression the world had rarely seen from him: contemplation. The room remained silent. The audience, the cameras, even the moderator, everyone sensed that something unusual was happening. This was no longer just a debate between two intellectual giants. This was something deeper, something more personal. Musk cleared his throat, rubbing his jaw before finally speaking. So let's say I accept your argument that faith isn't just blind belief. Let's say I accept that stories shape human civilization, that Christianity has played a key role in that. Peterson nodded, waiting. Musk leaned forward. But that still doesn't prove Christianity is true. Stories can be powerful without being literal. We tell myths to inspire, not because they actually happened. What makes Christianity any different? Peterson smirked slightly, as if he had been waiting for this exact question. Because it's the only story that doesn't just teach morality, it transforms lives. It's not just a set of rules. It's an invitation to meaning. Musk scoffed. That's a nice sentiment, but people find meaning in all sorts of things. Science. Art. Music. Even technology. Peterson nodded. Of course. But let me ask you something, why do you think meaning matters? Musk hesitated, caught off guard by the question. Because without meaning, life is just survival. We need purpose to push forward. Peterson's eyes sharpened. Exactly. And yet, purpose isn't a scientific equation. It's not something you can measure in a lab. It's something humans feel. Musk exhaled, rubbing his temples. But that still doesn't mean Christianity is the answer. Peterson smiled. All right. Let's take this from another angle. Let me challenge you with something. Musk gestured for him to continue. Peterson's voice softened, but there was an intensity to it. You're a man who has built his life on making the impossible happen. You've defied every odd, pushed through every failure. But let's say tomorrow, everything you've built, Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, all of it, disappeared. Your money, your influence, your projects, gone. Musk's expression darkened slightly, but he remained silent. Peterson continued, if that happened, what would be left? The question hung in the air. Musk blinked. I don't know. Peterson leaned forward, locking eyes with him. And that, Elon, is the real problem. Musk exhaled sharply. I'd rebuild. I always do. Peterson nodded. Of course you would. But let me take it further. Let's say, in rebuilding, you find yourself alone. No engineers. No investors. No team. Would you still push forward? Musk hesitated, shifting slightly in his seat. Peterson pressed on. Would you still be driven if you had nothing? Or is your drive tied to success, achievement, and proving something to the world? Musk clenched his jaw. That's a loaded question. Peterson smiled faintly. It is. But it's also the most important one. Because the difference between faith and mere ambition is this: faith remains, even when everything else is stripped away. Musk fell silent. His fingers tapped rhythmically against the table, his mind working at full speed. Peterson let the silence linger before speaking again. Elon, have you ever lost something so important to you that it changed you forever? Musk inhaled sharply, his gaze flickering with something unreadable. For the first time in the entire discussion, there was a flicker of pain in his eyes. Peterson noticed. You have, haven't you? Musk's lips parted slightly, but no words came. The audience held their breath. Finally, Musk let out a slow exhale. His voice was quieter this time. I lost my firstborn son. The air in the room shifted. It was as if the world had paused. Peterson didn't react immediately. He simply watched Musk, allowing the weight of the words to settle. Musk continued, his voice unusually raw. He was only 10 weeks old. Sudden infant death syndrome. One moment, he was here, the next, he wasn't. The room was utterly silent. Musk swallowed hard. People always assume that because I keep moving forward, I don't feel things. That I'm just a machine, calculating the next move. But that's not true. He looked down, his fingers clenched into a fist. That loss, it changed me. It made me see the world differently. It made me realize how fragile everything is. Peterson's voice was gentle. And in that moment, did science have the answers? Musk let out a bitter chuckle. No, Peterson nodded. Because science explains how. But it doesn't answer why. Musk exhaled sharply. So you're saying I should have turned to religion? Peterson shook his head. I'm saying that suffering forces us to look beyond logic. It forces us to confront the things we cannot control. And when that happens, we can either numb ourselves, or we can seek meaning. Musk's gaze was distant. I threw myself into work. I had to. If I stopped, I didn't know what would happen. Peterson nodded knowingly. Because the pain was too great. Musk didn't respond. Peterson sighed. Elon, I don't expect you to suddenly accept Christianity because of this conversation. But I do want you to consider something. If everything you've built could be taken from you, if the people you love could disappear in an instant, then what truly matters? Musk clenched his jaw, his eyes slightly red. I don't know. Peterson smiled sadly. Then maybe it's time to start looking for the answer. The room was so quiet that even the faintest sound of shifting seats could be heard. Musk exhaled sharply. His hands resting on the table. He wasn't used to being on this side of the conversation. He wasn't used to feeling this exposed. The moderator, sensing the intensity of the moment, finally spoke. Gentlemen, I think we're reaching a point where this discussion is no longer just about Christianity. It's about something much deeper. Peterson nodded. It always was. Musk let out a small, almost weary laugh. I didn't expect this to go in this direction. Peterson smirked. Neither did I. But sometimes, the most important conversations are the ones we don't plan for. Musk sat back, rubbing his temples. I need to think about this. Peterson smiled. Good. Thinking is the first step. But at some point, you have to decide what's truly worth believing in. Musk stared at him, his mind racing. And for the first time in a long time, Elon Musk, one of the most brilliant minds on the planet, was speechless. Elon Musk remained silent, his mind racing. The conversation had taken a turn he hadn't expected, leaving him exposed in a way he rarely allowed himself to be. He wasn't used to this, sitting in uncertainty, wrestling with something that couldn't be solved through logic or equations. Jordan Peterson didn't press him. He had seen this moment before, the pause before someone truly confronted their deepest thoughts, the moment when a person realized they were standing at the edge of something profound. The moderator, sensing the weight of the conversation, spoke cautiously. Elon, I don't think anyone expected this discussion to become so personal, but it's clear that what we're talking about isn't just theoretical for you. Musk exhaled sharply, rubbing his face with both hands. No, it's not. His voice was quieter than before. Losing my son, it made me realize how fragile life is. And no amount of intelligence, no amount of technology, can change that. Peterson leaned forward slightly. And yet, you've spent your life trying. Musk nodded, his expression distant. Yeah. I guess I have. Peterson studied him for a moment before speaking. Elon, have you ever considered that maybe, just maybe, your obsession with progress, with pushing humanity forward, isn't just about survival? Maybe it's about something deeper. Maybe, on some level, you're searching for meaning, just like the rest of us. Musk's jaw tightened. Maybe. Peterson didn't let up. You've built rockets to take humanity to Mars. You've created technology that's reshaping the world. But let's say you succeed. Let's say you colonize Mars, build a thriving civilization there. Then what? Musk blinked, caught off guard. What do you mean? Peterson's voice was calm but firm. Let's say humanity survives beyond Earth. We spread to the stars. We achieve everything you dream of. Then what? What's the ultimate goal? Musk hesitated. To ensure the survival of our species. Peterson shook his head. That's not an answer. That's an objective. But survival isn't meaning. If all we do is survive, if all we do is keep moving forward without understanding why, then what's the point? Musk exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. I don't know. Peterson smiled faintly. You keep saying that. And yet, you've spent your entire life acting like you do. Musk frowned. What do you mean? Peterson's eyes locked onto his. You talk about logic and reason, about engineering and science. But everything you've built, everything you've sacrificed for, it's not just about logic. It's about belief. It's about hope. You don't just want to save humanity, you want to give it a future. And that's something science alone can't provide. Musk sat back, absorbing the words. Peterson continued. You've dismissed faith, Elon. But in reality, you've lived by it. You've believed in something greater, something worth struggling for. And the irony is, that's the very foundation of Christianity, the belief that suffering has purpose, that sacrifice leads to something greater. Musk let out a small, bitter laugh. So you're saying I'm unknowingly living by Christian values? Peterson smirked. I'm saying you're embodying them, whether you realize it or not. Musk shook his head. But I don't believe in God. Peterson's expression didn't change. Are you sure? Musk blinked. What? Peterson leaned forward, his voice soft but intense. Are you sure you don't believe? Or are you afraid to admit that you might? The question hung in the air. Musk opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time in his life, he wasn't sure how to respond. The moderator, sensing the tension, interjected. Elon, is there a part of you that wants to believe? Musk looked down, his fingers tapping absently on the table. His voice was quieter now. I don't know. Peterson watched him carefully. What would it take for you to believe? Musk hesitated. I'd need proof. Peterson nodded. And yet, you've built your life on things that once had no proof. When you started SpaceX, did you have proof that private companies could reach orbit? When you launched Tesla, did you have proof that electric cars would change the world? Musk frowned. No. But I had data, calculations. Peterson cut him off. You had faith. Faith that if you took the risk, if you committed yourself fully, the results would follow. You didn't have proof, it came later, through action. Musk exhaled. That's different. Peterson smiled slightly. Is it? Musk rubbed his temples. This is exhausting. Peterson chuckled. Truth usually is. The audience was completely still. The world was watching, waiting for Musk's response. Finally, Musk spoke. I don't know if I can believe in something I can't see. Peterson nodded. And yet, you believed in things you couldn't see before. You believed in the future of Mars colonization long before the first rocket launched. You believed in electric cars before anyone else did. You've spent your life betting on things that didn't yet exist. Musk exhaled sharply. So what are you saying? Peterson's voice was calm but firm. I'm saying that maybe faith isn't about certainty. Maybe it's about taking the step first, and understanding follows. Musk shook his head. I don't know if I can do that. Peterson smiled knowingly. You already have. Musk looked up, his expression unreadable. And for the first time, Elon Musk, one of the most brilliant, calculated minds on the planet, was considering something he had never allowed himself to before. The tension in the room was suffocating. The audience, the cameras, even the moderator, everyone was waiting for Elon Musk to respond. But Musk just sat there, silent, his fingers tapping lightly against the table as he processed everything. For a man who had built rockets, reinvented transportation, and changed industries, this was unfamiliar territory. This wasn't about numbers, engineering, or strategy. This was about something much deeper, something he had spent his life avoiding. Jordan Peterson watched him carefully. He knew this moment was crucial. He had seen it in people before, the exact instant when a belief system, no matter how rigid, began to crack. Musk finally exhaled, rubbing his face with both hands before looking up. His voice was quieter now. You make some compelling points, Jordan. But belief, faith, it still feels like a risk. Peterson nodded, leaning forward slightly. It is. But so is everything worth doing. Musk frowned. Peterson continued. Think about it, Elon. Every great achievement, every breakthrough in history, began as a risk. The Wright brothers had no proof their plane would fly. Scientists had no certainty the moon landing would succeed. When you started SpaceX, everyone said you'd fail. But you still moved forward. Why? Musk hesitated, then said, because I believed it was possible. Peterson smiled. Exactly. That's faith. Taking action before the proof exists. Not blind belief, but trust that something greater is possible. And that's the foundation of Christianity. It's not about ignoring reality, it's about having the courage to move forward, even in uncertainty. Musk exhaled sharply. But what if I'm wrong? Peterson tilted his head. Wrong about what? Musk gestured vaguely. All of it. Religion. Meaning. What if I bet on the wrong thing? Peterson's expression softened. And what if you don't bet at all? What if you spend your whole life running from the question? You might succeed in business, in innovation, but will you ever find peace? Musk's fingers stopped tapping. He went still. The question had struck a nerve. Peterson pressed forward. Elon, let me ask you something. Have you ever been truly happy? Musk blinked, clearly caught off guard. What? Happy, Peterson repeated. Not just satisfied. Not just driven. But deeply, truly at peace? Musk looked away, his jaw tightening. I don't know. Peterson nodded as if he had expected the answer. That's because success doesn't fill the void. Progress doesn't eliminate suffering. No matter how much you achieve, there's always something missing. And you felt it, haven't you? Musk didn't respond right away. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, yes. The audience barely breathed. Peterson leaned in. And that's why this conversation matters. Because, Elon, you're not just searching for progress. You're searching for purpose. And deep down, you know that purpose isn't found in technology or business. It's found in something far greater. Musk exhaled sharply. But I've spent my entire life rejecting that idea. Peterson smiled slightly. And yet, here you are, questioning it. Musk chuckled, but there was no humor in it. So what? I just suddenly start believing? Peterson shook his head. Faith isn't an instant switch. It's a journey. And like every journey, it starts with a single step. Musk sighed, rubbing his temples. I don't know if I can do that. Peterson's eyes softened. Then let me give you the same advice I give to thousands of people, start small. Don't force yourself to believe. Just be open to the possibility. Be willing to ask the hard questions. Be willing to seek truth, even if it takes you somewhere unexpected. Musk let the words sink in. The moderator, sensing the weight of the moment, spoke carefully. Elon, if I may ask, after everything we've discussed today, do you still think faith is useless? Musk chuckled softly, shaking his head. No. I don't think it's useless. Peterson smirked. That's a start. Musk exhaled, leaning back in his chair. I still have a lot of questions. Peterson nodded. Good. Questions lead to answers. And answers lead to understanding. Musk looked at him for a long moment before finally saying, maybe I'll start looking. Peterson smiled. That's all I ask. The moderator glanced between them. Gentlemen, I think we've just witnessed one of the most fascinating conversations of our time. Jordan, Elon, thank you. The audience erupted into applause, but Musk barely heard it. Because for the first time in his life, he wasn't thinking about rockets, or Mars, or the future of humanity. He was thinking about himself. And for the first time, he wasn't sure what came next.